Who needs more protein? Well, women who are trying to lose weight. When you're under stress, if you're at risk for type 2 diabetes, osteoporosis, you're obese, and ironically, those who are less active, while it may be intuitive to think those who are more active need more protein, and they do, those who are less active actually synthesize muscle protein at lower levels than active older adults. So, your inactive friend, same age, next door, potentially needs more protein than you because I'm preaching to the choir, right? And you're actively listening to this podcast, I hope. I'm Deborah Atkinson. You're listening to Flipping 50, where I address your top struggles and concerns and hope to mostly inspire you. I share what to eat, how to move, and how to change your mindset so that you can have the energy and the vitality that you want, need, and deserve in the second and better half. And today's episode is not a stranger to our audience. In fact, probably within the last 6 months, I've done another podcast, and I will link to that in the show notes. In fact, I will link to an entire stream of them. There will be close to half a dozen resources for you in the show notes, so you don't want to miss that at flipping50.com/how much protein in order to really deal with this. So there's a couple of things going on here. It's not just about how much protein, it's about what kind, it's about when, it's about what phase of life or what kind of training you're in or doing that could increase your protein need. So, how much protein and when you need it is coming up. It's still a topic, even though we visited many times, that's not clear for many. So, I'm going to attempt to clarify it for you again, or maybe clarify the next piece, because let's face it, there are a couple of things going on here. Number one, there is a wide controversy, and there's reason why you are legitimately still questioning your protein needs. And I want to dissolve the biggest challenge or biggest resistance that you may be coming, because it may be an internal one where you doubt this and you're pulled this way and you see something working for someone else or seemingly superficially working temporarily. And then later, you're not seeing what happens when they stop doing that or the weight regain that might be happening, right? We don't always get to evaluate the in the moment with the full story. And so I want to support you. And with the facts and the many little topics that I'm going to bring up today, because these are questions that I get consistently and continually from both our membership, the Flipping 50 Cafe, and from our insiders group that is free and open to the public. And I'll link to that as well. And from all sources on social media and from our email subscribers, we're on a regular basis. So collectively, we have questions. And one of the best things that I can tell you is look for the feedback your body is giving you. Are you maintaining your optimal body level of composition? So adequate muscle and appropriate fat. So I don't want to assume that everybody listening wants to lose weight, because that would be an injustice to you. You may not. You may, in fact, actually want to gain lean muscle mass, and that may be your number one focus. And I will say this: whether you want to lose weight or need to for good health, or you are maybe underweight, or certainly know that if you maintain the trend you're on now, that you are subject to, because of such a low percent body fat, you're subject to becoming frail. So look at yourself now. Think about where that's going and trending in 10 and 20 and 30 years. Look at your parents. Are you following their footsteps, changing the direction and trajectory that you're on? So important questions. So I think that for all of us, our focus should be on either maintaining because you're in a good spot now or gaining lean muscle mass. And in order to do that, we will require more stimulus, both from the kind of exercise that we get and from the protein and other well rounded dietary intake that we have. Focus on the muscle. This we can control. The fat loss, we cannot, but we can influence it by focusing on the lean muscle gain and maintain. This episode, before I go deeper and start rifling, so please buckle your seatbelt, get ready to go for a little bit longer walk, and you're probably going to want to listen to this one again or go to show notes if you're not. But this episode is sponsored by twofold. The Flipping 50 Cafe. We open twice a year for enrollment. If you're listening to this when it's live, we are doing a special Black Friday event. So, in a little less than 2 weeks, you will find the cafe is open. So, if you're looking and love to save for a community that is built and based 100% on exercise, fitness, and all things that support it diet, stress, sleep, looking at an education for what is happening to your hormones, how does exercise influence your hormones, how do your hormones influence your exercise, or should, this is your place. It was made for and built for women in menopause. There right now is a waiting list if you want notified when we're open, chance to save, and get a couple juicy bonuses during Black Friday. Typically, we're open twice a year, so you will see this open at the end of the year again. And if you need a monthly option, that'll be the time you need to wait for. And if you're listening, knowing you need to get started, but struggling to get started or restarted during this mid post pandemic time that we're in, I know how hard it can be. If you took a sabbatical, you gained some weight. So we've got a 5-day flip. So I don't want you to sit and wait until we open. Start doing something now. And I'll put both the link to the cafe and to the 5-day flip in the show notes. And again, that is flipping50.com. How much protein? Okay, let's dive in. As I said, buckle your seatbelt. I'm going to go through a lot of things and really ask questions that I'm being asked and give you some answers. So, be a really good set of show notes for you to go and look at to find exactly what you want or need. Okay. How much protein do you need? So, first of all, let's talk about that set of baseline because then I'm going to talk about what will increase your need. And I want you to keep going. So, don't just stop with that. Or if you have to pause because work calls, you're there, your commute is over, you got to pick up and listen to the rest. So, here's what the RDAs say. The recommendation is about 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. And that's kind of an elusive. So, unless you've got a calculator, if you're here in the United States at least, that gets a little bit tricky. So, it's your body weight divided by 2.2. So, you might take, say, doing math in my head, sitting here, not really easy, but like 110 pounds divided by 2.2. So I'm talking really small person, really small woman, right? Then we get to something, just over probably 55 grams of protein, something close to that. Don't check my math, please. But I'm giving you a rough idea, which is a little bit easier. It also comes out to about 0.3 per pound, which for some of us, that's easier math. Take your body weight times 0.3. Now, that is so very low. That's the RDAs. They've been antiquated for a decade and a half. Authorities in meaning registered dietitians, meaning protein researchers, meaning everybody not associated with the government or the Dairy Council or the Beef Council or the Wheat Council, has suggested that the RDAs are antiquated and not intended to make anyone living in current times optimally healthy or definitely not helping us thrive. And there are some other issues with that. There's the significant body of research disagrees and contests that this recommendation is far too low for good health or optimal health, which is what we want. And we're not shooting for not sick, right? We're shooting for how do we feel good, thrive. But particularly in the aging population, this is true because there aren't specifics. And we know, based on research, that frailty from what we call sarcopenia, increased or significant muscle loss with age, as well as muscle strength, are issues, as is osteoporosis, obesity, metabolic syndrome. These issues are supported by higher protein needs, and yet there's nothing there for older adults, not in the RDAs at least. Protein research and researchers say, listen to this, 1.4 to 1.5 grams of protein per kilogram body weight. Now, for an average person, that comes out to about 120 to 130 grams of protein per day. Now, what's important is how do you take that in? So, per meal requirements are necessary because your body has a limit, and we'll talk more about that, of about 30 grams minimum of protein, high quality protein. So, it is a per meal dose. So, you need, yes, a total at the end of the day, but somebody is not going to tell you you need a total of, let me give you an example. What might it be? um, Digestive enzyme, maybe if some of you are taking that, or of a specific medication. If you need it and it's really supposed to be taken in 2 or 3 times a day, say it's penicillin for an illness, there we go. Um, it doesn't say take this total per day, right? It says take one with every meal, right? And those things are very important to protein as well. We'll talk more about why. Who needs more protein? So if I just gave you the baseline, your needs, 1.4 to 1.5 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight, or for the average person, about 120 to 30 grams per day. What will elevate your need? And that would be people who are shooting for weight loss who need it. So whenever we're talking weight loss, and this is quote unquote from Dr. Donald Layman, who is a professor of nutrition at University of Illinois. Whenever we talk about weight loss, you should always base protein needs on body weight, your protein need on body weight, not on percent of calories. So the given recommendation of, percent protein, percent carbs, percent fat from your diet has always been out there as a health instructor for 15 years at a university. So I would spew this out every semester in 3 or 4 or 2 sections, depending on the semester, over and over and again. And I thought, what a wide range. This is so nuts that we give them between 10 and 35% of your total diet should be protein. That is ludicrous. So I, as a trainer, might think, okay, I want that number closer to 30 or 35. You may be thinking, well, I reached 10 to 15%, so I'm good, right? So you want to get very clear. But if you're talking weight loss specifically, you want to base your protein need on your body weight, not percent of your calories. Percentage of calories is very misleading. So if you drop your calories, then protein could easily dip way below the even minimal level suggested by RDAs. If you keep your protein amount the same and you're dropping calories, it will be considered for you a high protein diet. And yet, it's not high protein. It's the same as it always was. You're simply reducing your calories. So, you want to be sure that it could be high protein on one diet, low protein on another, yet it's still the same amount of protein. And your body and lean muscle mass requires that same amount. Breakdown, muscle breakdown that occurs with dieting or when your body senses starvation, right? It doesn't know you're doing this on purpose. This is true of fasting too. So, those of you out there putting your toe in the water or committed to intermittent fasting who feel like I'm not making any results, there may be a reason. The breakdown that occurs like 50-50, which means you're losing 50% muscle, 50% fat just to survive. That's what your body will do if your senses you're in starvation mode. So if you're doing, 16, 18 hours of fasting, that is also happening then, by the way. So dieting on a high carb diet, like the food guide pyramid, which suggests, it's always the greater macronutrient percentage always comes from carbohydrates. You're going to break down about 35% of your lean tissue and 65% of fat. All right. So the odds get a little bit better when you're not starving and you're doing the RDA version or food guide pyramid. If you go on a high protein diet, your muscle tissue breakdown drops to just 20%, while your fat is obviously 80% better, right, on a high protein diet. So, the right dose of exercise, if you're doing resistance training also on a high protein diet, while, yes, intending to lose weight, you can get less than 10% muscle breakdown. But the absolute message here, I hope you're gathering, is anytime you're dieting, you are going to lose a portion of lean muscle mass. Your goal is to keep it as small as possible. Sleep also helps, but we're going to stay on protein today. So, suggestions for boosting your fat breakdown, reducing muscle breakdown during weight loss effort. Here we go. 1, watch your percent body fat and the amount of lean muscle. Get a smart scale. Don't drive yourself crazy. You weigh and record, say, once a week, same time every week, same body status, meaning just out of bed, probably just went to the bathroom, haven't had anything to eat or drink, same time, same day, no exercise. Then watch that number, look closely at your muscle, your fat, and the habits that you've got right now if you're not reaching your goals. Questions I have for you: are you getting the required amount of protein daily? Are you just eating randomly? Do you have any idea how many grams of protein that you're actually getting? Next question is, do you need more protein at your meals? So it's not just a total at the end of the day. Remember, you've got to take it in a per meal dose in order for it to benefit. More on that coming up. Support from protein powder, and yes, always food first, or from an amino acid supplement. Is that necessary or needed in order for you to get it? You're getting too full. You've eaten all the protein that you can at each of those meals, but your satiety, because protein does provide satiety, and you'll hear more about that as well. Do you have enough volume in your exercise? At least 3 sets, say, in strength training of working major muscle groups to fatigue. 3 to 4 even would be better. So if you're only doing 1 set of each exercise for a muscle group, you're only doing 2 even, you would bump that up to getting 3 or getting 4, making sure you're giving yourself adequate volume within a workout. You don't want to be getting your volume from just a lot of exercise. People who say, women particularly in midlife, who say to me, I'm very active. Describe that to me, because if you're doing a lot of endurance exercise, you're doing more running and more walking and more Zumba and on your elliptical and da 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 da, you're probably contributing to muscle wasting. What we need you to do is high intensity workouts, particularly in number 1, resistance training to muscular fatigue, or you will be losing muscle mass, even if you're doing tons of endurance. And I would say this, especially if you're doing tons of endurance exercise. Okay. Next, it is about the volume. Do you have enough exercise volume? Are you allowing recovery between your resistance training volume? So again, if you're exercising all the time and I'm not getting any results, could you say that? Is that you? So the question is, well, are you doing back-to-back workouts, not giving your muscle a chance to recoup? Or skipping meals, thinking, okay, if I fast, I'll do better, get faster to my goal, but you could be losing that muscle, remember? So all you're doing is you're on this treadmill of, okay, I'm going to run this direction, I'm going to weight train, and then I'm going to fast. And then you're losing muscle, losing muscle. So all you're doing is coming back and trying to stimulate that muscle again, as opposed to getting ahead. You're just like, I can't get any results. And eventually, when you're stressed, you missed workouts, you're not sleeping, you're contributing to that muscle decline. So, less exercise, just higher quality when you do it. Make sure it's on point, no questions, and that's where you're at. The same is true for bone density. You don't need more every day. You've got to have the muscle first in order to be able to do the things that contribute to bone density, which is more intense exercise, resistance training, namely. Okay, so important for you to think in most weight loss groups where there is exercise. So, in one study, looked at a group who did walking only, then a group that did walking and Pilates, and last, a group that did strength training. Only the subjects in the group who did strength training held on to their lean muscle mass and experienced the least amount of muscle losses. It takes both high protein and resistance training, especially as you age. So remember that you've been losing muscle mass since you peaked at 25. Every decade, we lose more and more, and accelerated for you at the end stage of perimenopause, beginning stage of postmenopause. And if you didn't pick up weights and that happened, that little window for you happened during the pandemic when gyms closed, you didn't have dumbbells at home, you couldn't get them at even Amazon, right? Target, if you ventured in, we need to mitigate that right now, because 8 to 10 years from now, we will probably see a spike of devastating disabilities. More people having sarcopenia, falling unnecessarily in their early 60s when that should be delayed for at least decades. We'll see that curve go up. Even those of us who are doing strength training, we will fall more in our 80s and our 90s and in our hundreds. Are we going all the way? I'm going all the way. Than we did in our 30s and our 40s and our 50s. But those losses started to be very significant in our 30s. We just didn't notice them. Number one, we were too busy, but they've happened. And that is what we've got to pick back up on. All right. High carb. Let's talk a little bit about high carb. So basically, that's the RDA standards. And I've mentioned that. High protein often will only be a perception. And based on the fact that you haven't been getting enough protein before, you haven't consciously been thinking about it. So it's not necessarily that you're going on a quote high protein diet. It's that you've been under eating protein for much of your life. And that's based on if you reduce calories but keep the amount of protein that you eat similar, then of course it's going to feel like you've got a high protein diet, right? So just challenging your thought process there, right? And I am going to answer that question about kidney and renal issues. And I'll answer it now, but I'll answer it again later. That always comes up, but inevitably it's like a rumor that's been passed on here and there. Registered dietitians, physicians, researchers all agree there is no research or body of research to show that the height of protein intake that I'm talking about here contributes to any kidney issues. Only if you already have an existing kidney or renal issue, or you're more susceptible. For instance, you have diabetes. Would you or should you check with your physician about what comes up and get their either guideline, recommendation, or agreement to watch what happens for you? Okay, so let's talk about this. Who who needs more protein? Older adults, injured or ill. And what I'm pointing to here is you're inactive. You're at bed rest. That's kind of the key that we're looking at. We want to keep you active on your feet and mobile, because if you're at bed rest, your muscle is wasting faster. So definitely older adults over 65 who are at significant risk for sarcopenia. Number one, because it's been about 35 years since they started losing muscle mass. Injured or ill, inactive adults of any age, they need high protein, nutrient dense foods even more than active, because if you're active, your muscle protein synthesis is better. Your ability to use protein you eat for the use of your muscle and break it down. Under stress, and losing weight, by the way, is a stress, right? If you have type 2 diabetes, although, again, you're at this catch 22 where the amount of protein you can eat that may need to respect your risk for renal disease, and the amount you need to eat for satiety and for supporting blood sugar levels is a kind of a line you've got to walk. Those with osteoporosis, used to be 20 years ago that more protein was a risk for osteoporosis and cause leaking from the bones. Not true anymore. It's absolutely the opposite. So I want you to keep an open mind when you hear research that, wait, I believed this way for so long, and I believe maybe even. So go here with me, said with respect. If you're plant-based and you thought that's the best way to go and it's healthy, watch your lean muscle mass, watch your percent body fat. Make sure you know what's happening for yourself that in that way as well. And last but not least, the obese need more protein. It's very difficult to achieve satiety, the feeling of fullness with plant. Why do older adults need more protein? Number one, we all have reduced muscle protein synthesis. Often, older adults will also have reduce activity. Just by default, we're not getting up, we're not having to go to work. The pandemic may have brought this on for a lot of people, but reduced muscle protein synthesis occurs simply because of aging, because because they're not having enough protein, and because of lack of activity. And there it is. Reduced activity is another one that could be with anyone. Potentially reduced activity in the kind that they actually need. And that's an important consideration, like resistance training, which stimulates muscle protein synthesis. So it's not enough to just walk. More easily in a catabolic state when you're an older adult. Women in menopause, specifically with less estrogen, more susceptible to negative effects of stress, causes a catabolic state, which means breakdown of muscle happens much easier than gaining of muscle, which is an anabolic or rebuilding state. More protein can put you more easily in an anabolic state. Again, osteoporosis and sarcopenia, which is the number one reason for frailty, it's the significant loss of muscle and strength that occurs with aging unless it's mitigated. And protein's role in maintaining and building lean muscle is very clear. You're not going to gain muscle without it. You do, however, I'm not negating carbohydrates. So, although you may want to reduce them, we don't want to eliminate them. You've got to have them. So, when do you want your protein? Another question. Evenly distributed throughout the day, not all at once, not a huge meal at dinner when you haven't had breakfast or lunch or you skipped or skimped. So, positive protein balance from a meal only lasts for about 3 to 4 hours after you eat. So, although snacking is not something I recommend for most of our women, if you are on the more frail side, very small, thin framed, what we call a hard gainer, it's hard for you to gain lean muscle mass, or if you have adrenal fatigue, another reason, you may want to supplement with some snacks in between that are also high protein. And or stay tuned, we're going to talk about amino acid supplements to boost that again. You also want to bookend your strength training workouts, so having it pre and or having it afterward, definitely afterwards. Your workouts for strength training can help kind of basically start your recovery before you even start your workout. So it prevents muscle breakdown that happens during exercise, during all exercise, during the right kind of exercise prescription. Exercise is a breakdown activity. You get fit, you get stronger between workouts when you recover actively. If you don't sleep well, you don't eat well, and you don't take that rest from striking those same muscle groups, you will not recover as well. And you will see, you will see if you see any long distance endurance runners, triathletes, marathon um, completers that are more emaciated, that there is less lean muscle tissue there and less bone tissue there as well. And all of that is, there's muscle wasting going on. So if you're doing endurance activity, by all means, make sure you're increasing your protein, make sure you're getting into the weight room to offset the losses that will happen. Okay. So increasing your protein for 24 hours after strenuous exercise, namely strength training exercise. But if you were to do endurance, and again, it's not necessarily recommended, it's important that you're refueling continuously. So it's not just that one post workout meal, but if you did a heavy strength training session, we have a virtual retreat coming up for the Flipping 50 community, January 8th. Its doors are open right now. You can get in. The sooner you get in, the better the rate. But we'll be doing a strength training session followed by a core session. We'll be, parking ourselves, somewhere, probably sitting to go over hormones 101 and 201, talking about their influence on exercise and vice versa. And then we'll be doing a more challenging yoga session as well. And that's going to be a challenging morning, right? So, several things back to back. We'll do a little bit of high intensity interval training in there as well. And that's going to require a little bit of recovery, more than a typical, oh, I did my strength training for 30 minutes, or I've done my high intensity interval training today for 20 to 30 minutes. When you're doing, 1.5, 2 hours, even though we're taking small little breaks, it's still the strenuousness or the quality of that strenuous uh, vigorous activity is still greater. So it's going to take more protein for 24 hours after to help you recover. So be thinking about that. Studies show ingesting protein before workouts, though, also increases energy expenditure after workouts. So planning to do a strength training workout today, um, then I would have what I call often at the very least, even though I may feel better not eating, I will have what I call then a simple shake. And so it should be higher in protein if you're about to do strength training. Your body likes carbohydrates if you're doing high intensity work, but you want protein and focusing on that, but you want it to empty from your stomach fairly quickly, not stay there, bog you down. So a simple protein shake, say unsweetened almond milk and the protein powder, just blending it up. Maybe it's a little cinnamon, a little cacao if you want it to be chocolate, and you're blending it up, drinking it. That's going to empty from your stomach really quickly and be ready. That enhances the energy expenditure that I will have after my workout, which is one of the greatest benefits of exercise in the first place. Let's face it, the amount of calories you burn during exercise is not all that great. You've looked at the treadmill after the workout, and strength training is not known as a high calorie burner during the exercise, but it is the after burn. We call it EPOC, excess post oxygen consumption, as your body is paying back and repairing all the things that had to rev up during exercise. There's then this deficiency, and it supports the payback of all of those things. That takes more energy, more expenditure, and it's boosted if you have a pre exercise snack. So, things to think about, especially important for those of you who are aging and wishing for optimally that the best fat burn may not come from not eating before you exercise, may come from eating so you can expend more energy, feel better during the exercise, and get that burn afterward. So it also stimulates your lean muscle mass, but fat loss as well. How much protein can your body absorb at one time? And that's where it comes down to that per meal dose. About 15 grams of essential amino acids at a time, or that's equivalent of 30 grams of protein at a meal. All right. So don't hear this as a range, but if you eat 30 grams of protein. So literally, maybe this is a bison burger, right? I love bison. I love wild meat. So I'm going to have a burger, and it's going to be about 5 grams. And that's the equivalent, 5 grams in weight. That's the equivalent of about 30 grams of high quality protein. That's going to give me about 15 grams of essential amino acids, which is what I want. Now, if we're older, we may not assimilate all of those essential amino acids quite as well, like pulling them out of the food for the use of our body. So, higher levels of protein per meal for older adults to the point they could tolerate it will help them to stimulate muscle building. Your body can't handle more than 50 grams. So you're looking for a minimum threshold of about 30 grams of protein per meal up to about 50. So that big Uncle Buck steak hanging off the plate, you're not going to, even if you could consume it and not be miserable, it's not helping your body more. It's like you're at quota, and then it's probably just going to be stored as fat because it's excess calories. What makes a protein high quality? Because we use this term very frequently. Higher essential amino acid profile. So there are 9 essential amino acids we have to take in from our food every day. And, potentially, if we don't get them all in with the same meal, not ideal. We want you to do that, but if you took some in the morning and some in the at noon, and they complement each other, that also might work. But as you age, it's important to get the highest quality you can at each time that you do it. But the higher essential amino acid profile, meaning those 9 proteins, if you think of a skyline or a bar graph, and there it's a vertical bar graph, each of those essential amino acids is in, say, beef or bison or chicken or fish, or the combination of beans and rice differently. So if we were looking at just one amino acid like leucine, which is a very important one for lean muscle, the highest would probably be from the bison. It's actually the highest in organ meats, and I'll bring this up in just a second. But from organ meats to, say, wild meats like bison or elk, to pork or to eggs or to shrimp, it's going down, down, down a stair step to the beans and the rice combination. So there's leucine in it. However, they can qualify to say that's a complete protein. But the level of those essential amino acids is very different across the board depending on what you're eating. Steak is going to be higher in all of those than is, say, poultry, definitely than is, say, cod or even salmon. So, important to think about that. A variety of food is important, but the more you're taking that higher quality protein in, the better. The ease of protein digestibility is also important. So, how easy is it for your body to break down foods? And again, it generally comes back to, now, some of you may disagree and say, I can't really tolerate breaking down meat. But part of that is because you haven't eaten it for a long time. So your body loses some of the enzymes required if they haven't been necessary to you. And so reintroducing it very gradually, like a baby, right? We introduce new foods to them all the time, little by little by little, because we didn't want that diaper from introducing things they weren't ready yet to digest. So we had to do it slowly. And likewise, you can do the same. We'll talk about how to help yourself because of a lower digestive enzymes in your body naturally and lower stomach acid in a bit. But its higher essential amino acid profile makes something high quality. Ease of digestibility more creatine, which is also an essential amino acid. But a question I've been asked intermittently, not largely, but people have asked about supplementing for muscle as well as for mental benefits. Creatine, especially if you're plant-based, you're having a hard time getting it. It's not included. It's very low in plant. The amount of creatine is generally recommended to be 3 to 9 grams per day for seniors, and for those seniors who are really struggling, or for those who are really active, higher levels than 9, or that high end at the very least per day is important. So you may need to supplement. You also really probably need to look at that if you're plant-based totally. Another thing that makes something high quality protein is its greater anabolic response, meaning it's going to help you rebuild those muscles and repair them. Supports positive nitrate balance. And let me read to you what that is. So, when we say positive protein balance, positive nitrate balance, this is literally quoted from one of the studies as a resource here. So, the value of RDA for older adults is debated, since its establishment was based on nitrogen balance studies. So it doesn't offer specific recommendations for older adults who need higher intakes of protein to maintain metabolic homeostasis. Meaning, again, we're losing muscle faster than we can gain it if we don't do anything. We have this need for more in order to maintain just where we're baseline, let alone if we want to gain it. The nitrogen balance is based on the fact proteins are fundamentally composed of nitrogen. So if we say protein balance, positive protein balance, or positive nitrogen balance, those are interchangeable. After being metabolized through transamination and deamination reactions, don't get caught up here if I'm losing you, is mainly excreted in the urine. Basically, you're going to pee it out, and in smaller amount in feces and in skin, you're sweating it out. And according to this paradigm, when nitrogen intake exceeds its losses, that's a positive balance. So no matter what, you're eating some protein, and some of it you're going to excrete. What we need is for you to be eating enough that, yes, that excretion is going to happen. It's a natural process, but it can't be more, can't even be balanced. It has to be greater positive balance that you're taking in than you're eliminating. That's the only way to favor muscle protein synthesis and be able to build and rebuild and repair. A greater excretion of nitrogen defines a condition of negative nitrogen balance, which puts you in catabolic state. Your muscles are breaking down. So it's suspected that the current RDA is insufficient to prevent muscle atrophy in older adults because it's insufficient to put you in that positive nitrate balance. That's the bottom line. So, want you to understand it takes more than you may have thought, and for reasons that you may have not thought about. So, what are the highest quality food proteins? Again, I mentioned organ meats, wild meats, because of the way they're raised. What they eat is what you are eating. Bison, elk, venison, I think there's boar. You'll find that one I have not done. Bison I do frequently, elk I do, and venison to rotate, so you're not always eating the same thing every day. Pork also seems to be fairly high quality. Eggs are high quality, but my next question is, why do certain proteins in midlife cause women digestive issues? Because this often comes up. Number one, changes in hormones cause changes in your gut microbiome, right? Meaning you don't have the same ability in bacteria balance, the good and the bad guys, to break down foods that you did. There's reduced stomach acid and enzymes in older adults. It's been proven that there's a very small fraction, maybe 10% even in 70-year-olds, as we had at 20. So no wonder there are more, constipation, diarrhea, bloating issues. Leaky gut. That means you've been eating something that doesn't agree with you, like a reaction, like a deadly or issue with an allergy that you notice, but it's a sensitivity that's happening and has been happening over time. Particles of food then are getting into your bloodstream. Leaky gut can be an issue, and then it makes it harder to digest proteins that you were doing fine with. Dairy, including whey protein is notoriously like the go-to, but whey and or casein, which is the other divisions like curds and whey, right, can be inflammatory. So they're problematic for skin. Whey specifically can spike your insulin levels. So blood sugar goes up, insulin levels goes up, and the reason it's so easily digested, which is fine if you're using it pre or post exercise and you're not sensitive to dairy anyway, or prone to inflammation, like a woman in midlife menopause is prone to inflammation. But if your rapidly absorbed whey pre or post exercise is supporting lean muscle mass, that can be okay. But if you're having it as this is a meal replacement kind of a shake that I'm making, and you're having whey any other time, that's going to spike your blood sugar and insulin. And that means you're storing fat. You can't burn and store fat. Your body will always preference storage to preserve your life. Then eggs and soy also can be problematic. And some beans, legumes, because number one, they can be problematic for some people anyway, but also because the higher carbohydrate sensitivity that women tend to have in midlife. So, things to think about. Soy is another one. Soy protein for some women can increase hot flashes, night sweats. So, it's worth testing for yourself whether or not that happens. And what about protein? Taken in collagen, right? So, questions that you may have there. I'm going to back up 1 second. Why not whey? So, specifically, insulin sensitivity and skin issues. So, you also may see skin clear up if you leave it. Food sensitivities are usually seen with gas, bloating, increased inflammation, but it's also poorly produced, many whey protein powders. And if you're looking for a bargain, potentially it's been even more likely that it's poorly produced if it's cheap. So other ingredients that are on it that are chemicals, that are fillers, that are sugars that you may not recognize, and it isn't filling because it is rapidly absorbed. So just want to hit on that again. And now let's talk about why not collagen. First of all, it's not a complete protein. Collagen does not have a great amino acid profile. It doesn't contain all the essential amino acids. It's wonderful for hair, skin, and nails. If given the right collagen strain, there are 5 different strains. It can benefit gut. Generally, the ones you pick up on the counter are more hair, skin, and nails oriented. So you've got to look and make sure it's got one for the gut. The essential amino acids, there are 9 of them, and 3 of those that are branch chain amino acids known to support lean muscle. And one that has the greatest impact I've mentioned, one of those is leucine. That seems to be if you've got a complete protein, but it's low in leucine, you've got a threshold. You want to get at least 2.5, some say 2.3, but I would say 2.5 grams of leucine per meal in order to achieve that muscle protein synthesis that you're after. Taking branch chain amino acids is not going to help with your lean muscle. You have to have all of the essential amino acids. So, especially if you're plant based, make sure if you're taking a supplement and going that route to help you get the rest of the way after whole foods, that it's essential amino acid. What's the problem with plant proteins? So don't shoot the messenger, all right? The number of carbs and calories that have to be consumed to reach a protein quota is a problem. And it will create a problem for you to create a caloric deficit. And we do need a caloric deficit as well as hormonal balance and positive protein status in order to lose weight but hold on to our lean muscle mass. Carb sensitivity is common for midlife women. So the carbohydrate intake you used to take and do fine with, maybe too much for you right now. Satiety also can't be attained. So I'm going to waffle back and forth. So although you will get full easily, often that fullness doesn't stick with someone who's on a plant-based diet. That's satiety. And that's because protein is such a high quality, takes a little bit more work to digest, whereas plant based foods are easier to digest and you do it quickly and you're hungry again very, very soon. What is the protein theory? Now, haven't brought this up, but one of the reasons why you may struggle with weight loss, especially if you're not using high protein foods, is that your body will signal you to eat more protein, but you may interpret that as just eat more until your body's reached adequate protein levels. And that is complicated, right? So you'll be wanting to snack. You will be tempted by things that are put in front of you, even though they're not high in protein. Although that's why your body keeps telling you you've got those cravings. So that's one thing to keep in mind if you're not attaining or achieving the protein quality or quantity that your body needs and wants, it will continue to tell you you're still hungry. It just won't tell you specifically what for. So, what if you can't possibly eat enough protein? Particularly for those of you who have a great growth to make, right? You weren't eating very much protein and you're realizing you were far below it. So you need to increase. Or for those of you that are trying to do the majority of your protein intake from plants, first food, right? That's always it. Then some support with protein shakes. Those of you who skip breakfast, skimp on breakfast, protein shakes have become an easy, simple, quick way for me to have a high protein breakfast, breaking that fast, which means breaking the breakdown or stopping the breakdown that's happening in muscle from an overnight fast for like over 30 years, almost 30 years now. So, I like it for the convenience, but I'm not just having that protein shake. So, I'm also having at least 1 or 2 cups of vegetables, green leafies, or cucumbers. Maybe cucumbers, celery might go in there as well. Avocado, getting healthy fats in there and the protein and minimal fruit. But there's a lot of fat, or a little bit of fat. There's a lot of protein in it, there's fiber in it, and micronutrients galore. Now, if I were going to eat a breakfast, I would not take the time to prepare vegetables like that. But the other option is having a leftover dinner or lunch for breakfast. So, still food first, but then protein shakes can help supplement and boost that protein if you're not getting it or can't, seemingly. And then, if still not, you could boost your protein synthesis with amino acid supplements for a high protein boost. The satiety, it's also a sleep aid without the additional calories when it comes from amino acid supplements. But by all means, if you're a dieter out there, you can't be saying, "Oh, great, I don't have to eat. I can just take amino acid supplements." That's not true because you're killing yourself in your micronutrient density. The things that give you bright eyes, that gives you great skin, that gives you energy, and that the rest of your body needs. You need to take in from food, ideally. So it's just getting you the rest of the distance. So you don't achieve the same dietary micronutrient boost from high quality protein sources if you're just taking supplements. So important to consider. So here's an example. You eat a protein, and this is comparing your high protein that you might take at a meal and supplements. So you eat a protein, half of that protein is the essential amino acid. So if it's high quality, but may not be true for lower quality proteins, but let's just, for example's sake, an amino acid supplement, if you're taking, say, 1 serving right now before I go work out, technically that's not a protein, right? So it's amino acids. It's not the protein that would break down into that. So, for instance, if I'm eating 90 grams of dietary protein a day, so I can do like 30 grams, little more than that, in a protein shake for breakfast, post workout, I'll have maybe a leftover piece of salmon on a salad for lunch. And then maybe I've got some bison tacos, and that's what I'm basing my dinner meal on. That's about 30 grams of protein if I'm getting adequate ounces of each of those animal proteins, 90 grams. But my goal, let's say, is I want to get, 120 to 130 grams of protein because that's my ideal body weight range. I could add essential amino acid supplement. And then I'm getting in a serving of that, maybe I'm getting 20 grams. So now I'm at that at least 110. I'm getting closer. So the supplements, the difference is it's 100% amino acids, right? So you take that and that's exactly what you get. With the protein, if I take in say 40 grams of protein at a meal, then I'm only going to get 20 grams of essential amino acids. So it's just a little bit different way to think about it. So you're getting a richer essential amino acid content from the combination of the two, which may support anabolism, the building of your lean muscle mass, more than kind of skimping or getting really low quality protein. So it's important for you to kind of consciously think about that. How can you get more protein without tons of more calories in plant based diets? And again, the amino acids help you out here, right? So it may help you both maintain a caloric deficit. Remember, it's reasonable, you don't want to go overboard, and may support your plant based intake so you're not getting full before you can reach the quota of the protein. So the next question is, what if I can't digest protein very well, which for a lot of women they can't. They'll notice when they start bumping up their protein, either from protein shakes, that they were gassy and bloated. And it could be something in your protein. So look to make sure you're not using whey protein. Pea protein can be disruptive for some and perfectly fine for others. I do great with it. I have a friend of mine who's doing pea protein, and she started to feel really badly on it, and that discovered that it was that, and taking the protein, the pea protein that wasn't agreeing with them too frequently. So check yourself, but it also can simply be it's easy to digest because it's a liquid and it's going to require your system to break down that protein faster, and you may not be able to handle that. So digestive enzymes prior to each meal, and that is basically the stomach acid, so betaine HCl. Some supplements come with the betaine HCl. It's hydrochloric, acid that's in your gut anyway. We just had a lot more of it when we were 20. We don't have as much of it now. And if you're stressed, yeah, even less. Bad news, right? So taking digestive enzymes about 20 to 30 minutes or within that window before a meal puts the stomach acid there so it's ready for the food until we're breaking it down, and can really significantly increase your comfort level when you're eating. So here's the question that a lot of people ask or should ask: what to have for breakfast. Not traditional breakfast foods. So, high carbohydrate foods, even oatmeal. I know you've been led to believe this is really good. It's for cholesterol, it's got high fiber. Still not enough. Even steel cut oats. I hear you out there asking that. So, you've got to break your fast, and ideally, you want to break it before you work out at a high intensity. And if you're just going for a walk around the block and you prefer not to eat, that's probably okay. But if you're doing something that is high intensity, whether interval training or strength training, eating before and breaking that fast. So you're exercising in your eating window if you are somebody who's doing even intermittent fasting, but just even overnight makes more sense. So, but nothing. Don't do just nothing for breakfast. Coast until noon. Don't do just coffee because that also increases your cortisol. You're already breaking down that muscle, and not carbs, not even oatmeal. So if you're going to do some kind of overnight oats, realize you've already bumped up the carb and you don't need the carb content at breakfast. We need it as the day goes on worse to bump up our serotonin levels for energy and feeling good, but we don't need it at breakfast. And remember, what you eat first thing in the morning or at any meal really sets you up for what happens the rest of the meal, what happens the rest of the day. So, high protein, whether that comes like you from a shake or like me from a shake. Or I will also do leftovers for breakfast some days, especially if I have like salmon or if I've smoked salmon. I will often have that. That's what I often have if I'm on vacation. I think of my most recent, it wasn't recent enough, but trip to Hawaii, staying at a hotel, it was really hard to find breakfast where I didn't want to go in and sit down, but I would stop at a place for bagel and lox and I would say, hold the bagel. So I would have the smoked salmon and, the lettuce and the tomato that came with it and make little taco wraps with the smoked salmon. It was delicious and very low carb. And you're not looking for no carb necessarily, but you want definitely high protein. That's your most important thing at breakfast. And last but not least, I'm going to mention this again, the question of kidney function. So it has only been proven in science for those with existing renal disease. And that may include those that have diabetes who are at increased risk for renal issues or kidney issues. But a high protein diet may not be appropriate for them, but it's only for them. For the rest of us, unless you're prone, you're fine. High protein has not been shown to bother kidney function whatsoever. I'm going to put a lot of resources in this episode that I will link to, including the amino acids that I use. And I'm going to end with this just briefly, breaking it down to what does a day look. So, first of all, if you're thinking, okay, I really need to think about this step that you'll take first. So, at each meal, start consciously thinking about how much protein do I actually have here? That might mean label reading, it might mean using an app. I don't love any apps, any really, because all of them will encourage you to follow. Here's how much you need. And remember, it's probably set up based on the RDAs. So it is wrong. So it's really important for you to just simply find out what is it that you need by plugging things into Google? How much protein in this? If I had 4 ounces of protein or 5 ounces by weight of it, how many grams of protein is that? So that you can just track what are you getting now? And then how can you close that gap? So start looking at what are my options for breakfast and what am I willing to do? A smoothie, uh, leftover lunch or dinner for breakfast? Do you want to have um, some of those foods that may be more inflammatory? Eggs are a source of protein, but each egg only has 6 grams. So remember, we're shooting for a minimum of 30 as a threshold. Bacon, sausage, you decide. Can you do that with whatever else might be going on with your health? And, is it a preference? So I think personally for me, starting my day with bacon or sausage just it isn't appealing. And it may be years of conditioning thinking that was fattening or whatever it might be. That's a piece of it for all of us. But it just doesn't appeal to me. So a smoothie is probably the closest because I too grew up on cereal for breakfast, basically. And, toast was always there. That wasn't really a favorite of mine. But peanut butter and jelly, sometimes in a wrap or a tortilla. For me, I could have done that at one point when I was training for things or riding a bike. But breakfast foods, that are a little bit more smooth and creamy, and I don't do yogurt because I don't do dairy anymore. So a smoothie is the next best thing. I like mine thicker. I do a smoothie bowl. But you decide what are you doing for breakfast? And then think about your lunch. And usually lunch and dinner are the easiest to get in protein because it's just more traditional to do. What protein are we having? Serving a family, it becomes easier. You're grilling chicken breasts or you're baking them or you're creating tacos with beef or try bison if you haven't. So you're doing that for the other of your meals, or you're doing leftovers from what you had last night. So thinking about how am I getting at least 30 grams of protein or working my way to that at each of 3 meals, then you're at 90. So if you're 150 or more pounds, you're going to need a little bit more protein than that. If you're 130, even, you're going to need a little bit more protein than that. So, can you do it? Can you eat more? Or do you want to supplement with your literally amino acid supplements, where you could take an amino acid supplement halfway through the morning or halfway through the afternoon between meals? So, remember that protein synthesis spike lasts for maybe 3 to 4 hours and then it begins to go down. So, if you've got a long space between your breakfast in the morning and lunch, or lunch and dinner, which is very typical, at about 3 p.m., that may be a really good time for you to have an amino acid supplement. And likewise, maybe midway through the morning as well. That gives you a little bump of where you're at with the amino acids that you're ingesting, making it to here's my protein intake for the day. The benefit, you're getting that boost in essential amino acids and yet not getting the caloric boost. So you're potentially going to be able to maintain that caloric deficit and yet maintain your lean muscle mass as you lose. So I hope that was helpful. I know this was a really long podcast. I am really looking forward to hearing comments from you about whether this was beneficial to kind of go through all of the things again. I'm going to link to other episodes that you might like. The references I've used for today are all in the show. So if you're a prove it to me girl and you want to literally go to primary resources, you can as well. And then, as I mentioned, the cafe will be open. This is where we have those kinds of this kind of deep dive frequently with special master classes just for our members only. So look forward to hearing from you. Flipping50.com/, how much protein. That's the show notes. And what are you waiting for? Let's start flipping 50 today.